So Ray Archuleta is a world-renowned soil scientist, and I would say he's kind of begun this motivational speaking around this topic. Like, I just love how passionate he is. Lill Erickson founded the Western Sustainability Exchange. Dr. Mark Trexler, you just heard from, the Director of Climate Change Knowledge Systems, and Marvin Nash, the co-founder of Encore Green Environmental. So we are super excited to have all of you today. And I'm going to bump Ray. Ray, I'm going to bump you. Do you mind? Oh. If I kick you out of a chair, he'll let me. He'll let me bump him over there. He'll let me do that. There we go. We'll kind of book in. And we'll just share the microphone a little bit and, kind of short answers. We want to make sure everybody has some time and make sure you put that right up in front of your mouth. We want to definitely hear these messages. So maybe start us out today, Jason, with...
And especially, I think we're going to, talk about community specific, where these, let's meet people where they're at, I guess you could say. And so, with us being downtown Boise, I mean, there's a lot of talk about, the affordable housing piece and like how important, when you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I mean, home, I think that's one of the most important pieces here. And so for the younger generations, it's really concerning because we don't have the luxury of buying, the cheap homes, I guess you could say, not necessarily cheap, but affordable, as per se 30 years ago. And so it's like, how do we embed ourselves into the community, I guess you could say, when we don't have a stake in it, we don't own anything in it, and so that's, I think, is a huge challenge. And so from that standpoint, when you're thinking about sustainable solutions, I think that's one very important one. So once you get past the housing situation, then it's like, okay, now we feel comfortable. Now what can we do? So I think that might be a good place to kind of start, because I know Ray's in Missouri, and he was talking about the price differences between Missouri and Idaho. Do you want to, try attempt a little bit of that question on, how is your communities, more prepared, I guess you could say, for some of the sustainable action? It's like to where, how are your young people doing, I guess is a better question. How do you feel your community is? Because we have some big challenges in Boise around that not only that affordability piece, but like we don't know what to do necessarily. I hear that a lot of times from young people. It's like, what do we do?
Well, one of the things, there is no plan, really, because when the COVID happened, a lot of people panicked. I knew about 10 or 15 years ago, our food system was very fragile. When people went to Walmart, there was no food. We've known for years that if everybody goes to the food store, to the Walmart, you can empty the shelves very quickly. Same thing with fuel. We're such a big country in the way that it works. It makes it very, very difficult. And now, with that in mind, Missouri was a very affordable place that you can go buy a house with 2 or 3, 4, 5 acres. That's gone. There is people starting to realize I am very in a very fragile situation because I live in a subdivision. I can't even raise my own food for the most part. So if you look at what we've done in the last 50 or 60 years and the way we set up our whole system, it's incredibly fragile. And so it's a very frustrating thing because the way we set the whole construct, and that's what we're seeing. So just this last comment, one of the things that we're getting to give hope to people when they think about, it's about food. First, whether we talk about strategies or logistics, if people cannot meet their basic need of just food, you can't even have these other discussions like climate and those other issues. So here's what we're doing is educating people that they can raise food. And like in my PowerPoint, we had one person that can raise 6,000 pounds of food in their own subdivision.
Yep.
So again, and like Mark talked about, is like the messaging is so all over the board, people don't know what to do.
Yep.
And so that's what some of the things that I have to deal with is just basic concepts of what we can teach since the beginning of the kids. How do you teach kids? How do you teach the high school? How do you teach these basic things when we're such a detached society from the planet?
Yep.
That's what I'm dealing with, just basic concepts.
Yeah, anybody else on that?
Let me come at it from a climate change lens for just a second, since that's sort of my thing. First of all, in Portland, where I'm from, just did a huge thing in making it possible now for anyone to have sort of a second structure on their lot. So it's a national first, as I understand it, and it should perhaps help alleviate some of the housing pressures, et cetera. But to follow up on something that Ray just said, if people are thinking about food, they're not going to think about climate change, or if they don't have enough food, they're not thinking about climate change. We need to figure out a way to have some of these conversations simultaneously, because it's easy to say food as that example, but it's also very common for people to say, well, we've got to, climate justice. We have to solve basically every problem in the world at exactly the same time that we're solving climate change. And that's a little bit of a hard lift. I mean, climate change is already a wicked problem, and so somehow we need to get the different constituencies talking to each other and supporting each other, but not looking at this as sequential. Because if we solve all these other problems first, we're guaranteed to be going down a very bad path on climate change.
Yeah, anybody else? You have...
I would say an important thing, too, is to develop a culture of cooperation. And in my community, we're really lucky because it was a railroad town, and so a lot of different people came into a rural area, and there seems to be almost an innate appreciation for diversity. And that has allowed us to move forward in a lot of ways, and we have some amazing nonprofit organizations and businesses, and it's the culture of our community to get along and to share resources, and it's helped us move forward in a lot of places compared to places where there's this is my camp and that's your camp, and I definitely don't want to be around you because you have nothing to offer me and you're going to hurt me. That attitude prevents a lot of creative thinking. So developing a culture of cooperation has been very important for us. And we still are faced with major housing shortages and all of that. But I think we're in a better position to come up with something that might work, that would be equitable, than a lot of other places.
So I may have a little bit different take on this. I'm kind of a Mike Rowe guy. Let's start back with vocational educations in our school systems. Let's teach kids how to be part of something. It's very easy to sit on a panel and say, well, we need to do this, and this. And for me, I came up through the Future Farmers of America and the 4-H system. And I learned how to put a seed in a cup and watch it grow and talk about photosynthesis. And I don't see a lot of those type of educational systems taking place. It's easy with our rural partners and probably even with some of our energy partners, that are out on the land drilling wells or doing whatever. They see a lot of those kind of things. We have to expose our kids that growing your food is not a shameful thing to do. I was raised in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. I've seen people live on less than $1 a day. I've seen them drink water out of 10 families go to one water hose to get a drink. They want to come here just for a job. So I think that I'm not blaming academia, but I think our educational systems need to make community development and education just like math and science and English and everything else. And so we can't blame the kids. They only know what we teach them. But, when the pipe fitters union needs to hire pipe fitters, where one of their number one recruiting places is? at the National FFA convention. Because those farm kids and those kids that came through that vocational, they know how to put two pieces of pipe together and put a bead around it. And so I was with a guy the other day that he works for John Deere, and he's a welding inspector engineer. All he looks at is welds on equipment that's built to harvest trees. And he has a degree in welding engineering, and that's his expertise. But he has a good job, he's got a family, and so it's challenging for me to see communities that demonize agriculture and the earth and those kind of things when they don't even understand what they're talking about. You know, if you want to find the best humane society in the world, drive down some rancher's road, because he's got 15 dogs out there that he throws feed to every night. You know? Why? Because he's a humanitarian. So I think that if we can encourage our communities to develop an understanding of stewardship, and that develops into leadership. But not everybody, and I'm living proof, can be a computer scientist. And there's not anything wrong with that, but that doesn't fit the need for everybody. I mean, you can, you know, I'm old. I was at the ag farm, or the USDA farm in Cheyenne the other day, and was visiting with Dr. Derner, and he said, you know, I still have kids come up to me. You know, we used to have the cow with the hole in the side, and you could take the, you know, the nutrition. And he said, I still have 30-year-old men come up to me and say, yeah, Dr. Derner, you remember when you showed us that? And it still has that impact. So I think we have to have impact education that helps with our community leadership. And when you look at the things that kids don't know, it's a true understanding of stewardship. They didn't grow the milk at Walmart, guys. It came from a dairy. And so I think that's the challenge, is the educational, not only the communicational part, but the educational part of what stewardship and stuff is really about. And you know, it's a challenge.
You know, one of the things that I think of when I think of the agricultural community, ranchers and farmers, is oftentimes they have a lot of land, and their need is often around a workforce, especially a young workforce. So have you guys seen any programs where, you know, a rancher, he builds, you know, some additional housing and allows, you know, young people or, you know, other people to come live on there, you know, rent-free or whatever, build their skills, you know, pay them. And so once their season is done, that person or that worker has some money in their pocket, you know, they learn something for a few months, and, you know, now they're hopefully connected into the community to say, hey, this person is tried and tested, and now we need to find them a permanent job to keep them in this community. You know, I think that is what we need to look at providing, because I hear all these farmers and ranchers saying, hey, we need help. And then we need all our young people. You know, I hear a lot of parents say, hey, I used to, you know, work on a dairy, you know, move around the sludge and doing all these different things. Like, and they're like, well, my kids don't do that. I'm like, well, whose fault is that? You know, is that the parents' problem? Is that a cultural thing? Because they're oftentimes our parents or our grandparents, you know, they seem really busy. You know, like when I was a kid, they seemed like they had way more time, you know, to do things. And it's like, where has that time gone? I think it's a lot more is now of news and media and worrying and all these different things. You know, so like it seems like it's such a challenge to get involved as a young person. I mean, I had to make this opportunity happen, because there's not a platform for me to go plug into and take some action. You know, and I think that's you know, I think there needs to be a partnership with the ag community and saying, hey, we're here to support you, and we want to learn these skills so we can help teach the young people, while at the same time having the resources to, you know, help them make a living, you know, or help them teach them the skills that we're talking about.
I got a little analog for you. So we have there's a group of educators that are teaching the top students in Cheyenne about the problems of climate change. But when you look at the curriculum, it's really the demonization of the fossil fuel companies and agriculture to a certain extent. And that's a curriculum. But they removed the 4-H extension agent from teaching the agriculture curriculum. You're talking about hiring. My son works for a farmer that farms 17,000 acres in the Altus, Oklahoma area. He just bought 2 new planters. He put them on 40 inches. There's 32 boxes. It's the largest planter that they've ever built. They got rid of 10 people because they just couldn't, the economics didn't work for the employment. They got rid of 10 people and now have 5 people that does the same thing that 10 people used to do because of the implementation of modern technology. You know, that's not it's a balancing act. But he couldn't find those people to do the work. And I think that's what you hear from a lot of people is we just can't hire, we just can't hire those people to accomplish those goals for us. But yeah, those are 2 instances that I have seen specifically where, number one, a school system, and you can't, I don't want to criticize them for teaching about climate change. They need to be taught. But we need to teach both sides, or at least have the discussion on both sides. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, how do we allow everybody, like you said, to have a voice? How do we allow that communication? And if we don't do it as adults, the kids are definitely not going to see it. They're not going to know how to do it.
And something you just said I think is important is it's not really about sides. It's about the whole story. This culture, what I've noticed is we do this right, wrong, right, left, right, pass, fail, and it's the whole story. It's more context and more spokes in the wheel that all go back to the same hub, which is planet Earth. So, yeah, I love what you're saying. Anybody else on that?
Look, I'm going to make I've been working on it for 32 years on just one basic problem. Let's go back since 1935 when the Dust Bowl started. And we were having massive, massive erosion when our agency was started. That's 86 years. And sediment is still the #1 water quality problem in the nation. 86 years. Thousands of employees hired, over thousands of employees. Billions of dollars have been spent, and we're still here. And so one of the things in this journey that I've learned, that here I went to college for 8 years, went to the science. We were taught in all the land-grant colleges. This is the way everything was built on this premise. Okay? So we were going to fix it. And one of the things, we had all kinds of computer models. So I quickly learned that all models are wrong. Some are useful. What does that statement mean? There is no model, even for the weather or even basic soil erosion, could ever come with the complexity of the natural system. It changes all the time. Once you understand little concepts of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, it changes all the time. So I started realizing we had to take this to the human dimension and understand, you have to understand human nature. And some of the things you brought up, Mark. The reason I use the word hope, because I didn't understand where you were coming up when you said the word hope. The hope that I think about is the hope that gives you the energy and the drive to go drive millions of miles, talk to thousands of people, bring an awareness. When you bring a rancher, when you've seen change, that's hope that I'm talking about. So I had to quickly understand, if we do not change the way the human mind and heart thinks, the rest of the resources are not going to change. Or get what Mark wants, is this collective to come together, and it starts with the understanding the way humans function. One of the things I started realizing when I told you my story, I had no hope for agriculture. I wanted to give up. Why bother? It's going off a cliff, and there's nothing I could do about it. But you see what's happened in the last 10 or 15 years has been absolutely phenomenal. Do you know that cover crops, now we have increased cover crops by millions of acres in the last 11 years? Just in 11 years? If you look at the word soil health 10 or 15 years ago on the web, thousands of hits. Now we have billions, 9,000 videos on YouTube. It's that collective hope that has done this. And let me give you another concept I learned about the military. You can have the best strategy, like let's go to the Iraq War. Brilliant strategy. But if you don't have logistics, can't take toilet paper and bullets to the men, you still lose the war. How are we going to facilitate the logistics that we were just talking about, what you brought out? Because here's what's happening. We can't even do grazing properly and understand what's going on, what you're understanding, what we've been observed. We're not even there. That's how far removed we're dealing with, guys. Strategy can be fine, but you cannot carry out the logistics. You still lose the war. So that's where we're at. And I didn't realize we were at such a low level of understanding how the soil worked. I was shocked. Here I went to graduate school for soils. I didn't understand how the soil worked. So my whole point is, how do we bring this collective and start? So we had to start at the local level. And so, Mark, I was thinking about what you were talking about. But by the way, you did a really good job on your presentation. I appreciate that. But if you watch how natural systems work, it does work from the cell and works as a collective whole. What you guys are doing is you're being that particular cell, which you're changing your whole local community. Same thing the way we're doing. So the cell, if you look at the whole body, it works as a collective whole. So my last point here is, if we continue to bring this, facilitate people with hope. And let me tell you why I'm saying this. Look, humans shut down right away. If you come out with a negative message, and especially if it's a person that lives in a subdivision, you know what they do? They give up. There is no hope. You know how many times now after we did that movie, that documentary, Kiss the Ground, how many calls I have had from all over the world? What can I do? What can I do to be engaged? Changed everything. One little movie that gave people hope. This is why a lot of times I don't want to be in environmental movies. They're depressing. I told them I don't even want to be in one. In fact, this Kiss the Ground, I told Josh Tickle, I said, Josh, Gabe and I do not want to be in that movie if you do not leave people with hope, because they will shut down. And now when that movie came out, oh my gosh, this movie even went up to Bill Gates. I'd have never thought that Bill Gates would have seen this. To DiCaprio, people that you would have never imagined would have watched this and now watch this. And I think this is what you're wanting, Mark, is this collective hope that will get us together so that maybe someday that we can get to that strategy point. But if we don't start somehow in communicating, it's those tiny little things do help. And so I would have never thought that this little movie would have gotten. And I've been struggling for years to even bring the fact that we're degrading the land. And just one more comment. Guys, I think sometimes, and I feel sorry for you, Mark, because you have the most complex job. The climate is so stinking complex. We know that the soil is complex, but the climate, which is driven by life, oh my gosh, you're dealing with that? So here's what I've learned. If you don't keep the message very, very, very simple to the mass, they get lost. And I think what happened initially, we started talking from the most complex system. It was the climate. Oh my gosh. So what we've learned is, let's take it so simple, starting with the soil, and we can get the ground covered. Because think about it. You said something very beautiful today. 40% of the land mass is rangeland. Oh my gosh, if you think about what we're talking about, less than 1 or 2% of the total surface area of this planet, which impacts the climate, is with less than 1% of the population. the ranchers, the farmers. Do you know how difficult it is, Mark, just to get people to agree to cover the soil? Do you know how just to even do that basic thing would be a miracle? So if you have an idea, Mark, how we could pull that off, man, I'm all game.
Yeah, Mark or Lill. You know,
Yeah,
any
Mark or Lill.
thoughts on that?
Here, because I can't even get that basic one thing done.
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know. In my life, I've seen the power of creativity, and I think inspiring, creating conditions in which people get inspired to take action can go light years and quickly to finding ways around these really big problems. And I think that's what we need right now. And in order for people to be creative, they need to feel like they're valued and safe, and they're not going to get beat up for having maybe a different view, and provide some resources to do it. So I'm going to digress to a really small example of this, but we run a farmer's market. And our farmer's market manager at the time loved children. And so he had a kid that wanted to have a booth at the farmer's market. And so we ended up creating this young entrepreneurial stewardship program where we spent 2 weeks in a summer camp, really before the market got going, and just teaching kids the basics of business and sustainable business practices, and then just giving them a chance to develop a business idea that they had. And it was so interesting to watch these kids, especially the middle school kids. But you'd be surprised how young they can, at 7 years old, they're like getting things.
Sharp as a whip.
And we underestimate how, I certainly underestimated how quickly kids pick up stuff. And they're not burdened by that, oh no, that's impossible. It's like, whoa. And they approached it like a game. So they wanted to have different businesses, and they would come together kind of naturally, form a little idea to have a business, and they'd come up with in 20 minutes, they had their business name, they had what they were going to charge. I mean, it's amazing how quickly they can do this. And then we would open up the farmer's market to the kids, and we would have kids stay, and they could come and they could sell their products, and they could sell all summer long. And they naturally learned we were teaching them about the environment and sustainable practices. They naturally knew, okay, I'm going to buy my raw materials from a local person, and I'm not going to use plastic. And they just so quickly adopted those ideas, and they're carrying them forward in their life. And it was a simple little thing to allow little kids to have but what it did that I think is instructive is that it gave them an opportunity to be creative, to come out in more of a playful thing. And these issues are super serious. I mean, but the heaviness of the seriousness of the wicked problem can really prevent us from evoking our heart and our creativity. And so I think anything that we can do to kind of lift it with not false hope, but hope with a strategy, and hope with kind of a trust and inspiration. At least it makes me be able to go through the day, and I see a lot of other people being able to go through the day and move forward on stuff and be excited about stuff, and then all of a sudden, instead of it being, oh my God, I have to do this, it becomes a fun thing to do. You look forward to the day. And I honestly believe that we have to have that kind of attitude to face this crisis. Otherwise, we're going to turn and run. Or those of us that are in it for the long haul are going to be pretty beat up. But anyway, I'm having fun with it, and I just share that as maybe useful.
And I agree with what people are saying here, but what I'm saying is that in addition to giving people hope, et cetera, somebody has to be thinking about the wicked problem, and somebody has to be trying to sort of coordinate the different constituencies that are out there and how to make progress. Because and as Ray talked about, 80 years of the Soil Service, when it comes to, in a sense, okay, we could go another 100 years, we could go another 200 years, enough fertilizers, enough other stuff. We could be talking about soils for the next 100 years. climate change isn't going to work that way, in the sense that we're going to hit thresholds, we're going to hit tipping points. The scientists are talking about the fact that we've probably already started to hit a couple of key tipping points, and that may be behind some of the changes to the jet stream, in terms of even more severe winters, et cetera. But scientists are concerned. Everyone talks about, well, we might have a foot of sea level rise by 2100. Scientists are concerned that we might have 10 feet of sea level rise by 2100, because we don't really understand the system. We don't understand what's going on in the glaciers of Greenland and in Antarctica. We don't know what's going on underneath the ice. And they're worried about that because the models don't tell us. And these things are happening far faster than they have ever happened before. We're forcing the climate at 100-fold more than it has ever been forced naturally. And so we don't really know what the implications of that are. So somehow we need to put together the different messages that we're talking about here, which are all absolutely correct. But somehow we also have to put them into the framing of this larger problem. Otherwise, we're going to end up at 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5 degrees, and that's going to be awful. And the farming systems that we have today won't survive that. And so somehow we've got to do the bigger picture and the micro at the same time.
Thank you, Mark. I have a comment quickly to that. I want to tell you a really naive story what happened when I thought, okay, we build critical mass. And we built critical mass, and I said, okay, I was in a position in NRCS that we were able to take it to the chief to the Washington, D.C. And just to get to Washington, D.C. is a miracle, like you said, Mark. It's a miracle to get there. We took it up there. We were excited. We got such a collective mass to go up there to Washington, D.C. We got it. Soil health, soil ecology. In fact, you can't get climate without soil and plant. They all work together as a collective. We're excited. Let's restore it. We can fix a lot of our issues. We can fix human health. We can do all this. We took it to the chief. We were pumped up, stood in front of Chief White, and Chief White said, okay, so who do we teach? And I said, Chief, everybody or nobody. Okay, so we went up there, and here's the brutal reality that came. I realize there's ancestral corruption in D.C. The chemical companies, the fertilizer companies, all the lobbyists, everybody has the year of up there. So then I knew that we had to take this to the people. See, I started learning, and I forgot my understanding of human nature. The thing we don't talk about here is human nature. That our human nature wants to take care of one thing first, me. And so that's just the reality that we deal with. Okay, so what was I going to do so that we can take it? We started working with groups and ranchers, and we took it to the rancher and to the farmer directly. Do you know why this movement got so big? Because we did take it to the rancher and the farmer, and they were demanding it. Because in the reality is, Mark, you talked about we got 50 or 100 years with the soils. Oh, no, we don't. Our soils are so darn degraded that we are at such a point. In fact, people will argue 40 or 60 years. I don't care about that. I care about right now on how we can make a change, because the moment you become a prophet and you say 40 or 60 years, you set yourself up for failure. They've been saying this for a long, long time. But I agree with you, Mark. We got to do something. And I think that collective is there. But here, I'll make one more statement. I think this is the way we can understand our planet is if you understand how your body works. I started learning that the soil works very similar like the human body. Let me give you an example. Recent scientists have found out that we used to think that the brain communicated to all the organs and they all work, and the brain was the central collective. That's not true. The kidneys and the heart communicate to each other separately from the brain. Here's what's happening. Even though you think as a collective that we're working randomly, but we're actually working as a collective and building to this repairing. Look what you're doing on your local area. Look what we're doing all over the country, how it's spreading all over. This is not just spreading here, it's spreading to Australia. This has gone to Europe. Regenerative agriculture is spreading all over the country. We have farms and ranchers that are getting off the high input chemical nitrogen. You know what's the most carbon demanding, energy demanding thing we do in agriculture? Chemical nitrogen. Huge, huge amounts of energy just to make nitrogen. Huge. Guess what we have now? Farmers do no longer use it. We're heading down that direction. But what I'm getting at is, so how do we propel that? It has to be a simple message that we can come together and work this out. But I think the message started very, very complex. And I'm glad that he brought up Gore. I'm glad he brought that up. But the message was complex to begin with. Here's my message that I think that will really help, and I think it'll help all of us as a collective. If we get people to understand that we're losing plants and organisms and biodiversity, because this is a biological planet, the climate runs on life. And so if we lose life, it doesn't matter what we do with the climate. It's over. Those are intimately connected. You can't separate those two issues. But people can see plants, they can see things that are simple to them. We can't understand the wind. We can't understand the climate because that's why I told you, Mark, it's incredibly complex. But if we keep it that simple, because I'm simple boy. My wife reminds me all the time. But here's what I'm saying is if we can focus on bringing more, that's why I hate the carbon message to begin with. Farmers do not understand carbon. It's an energy flow that changes every day. I can walk to the field and the soil aggregate, which is a carbon-based molecule, changes every 27 days. That's why I was never a big fan of paying farmers carbon. How are you going to measure it? The science is not there. It's expensive. How are you going to do that? My idea is, why don't we just cover the soil and pay them for biodiversity, satellite imagery, boom, snap. I can go, a high school kid can go there and look, oh, let me see your seeds. Let me see your cover crop seed. Oh, yes, give us your receipt. Boom, you're paid. I've worked in an agency, we can't even do right now and do verification with 16,000 employees. And how are we going to verify all the people I'm paying for carbon? Good luck. You're not being realistic. I've had to deal with the logistics on the ground. It doesn't work. It's too massive. We're too big. But if we make it simple, and that's why that message, my call to action, let's cover the darn soil. You know that if the Secretary of Ag said, okay, farm program, 70% of the farmers and ranchers get government help. What if the Secretary of Agriculture said, okay, Secretary, they said, if you're getting government help, you are required to cover the soil. Can you imagine what that would do? So that when I drive from California all the way to North Carolina, it's green in the fall and the spring. We have hundreds of millions of acres covered. It can be done like that.
Yeah, I guess I got three follow-ups. Like for Lill, you're talking about your example, your small example of the social kind of entrepreneurship program. I think those are critically important. For young people, not only it gives them a way to get involved in their own community, but it teaches them valuable skills. And I think Mark, the chess analogy. I love chess. It's one of my favorite strategy games ever. I don't even think my mom just walked out, but I don't think I've ever beat her, to be honest. And so I've played a lot of chess. And so I think gamification is a big thing, like to get the young people involved. If you can make it a game like The Sims, like where they're in their own community and they're actually have a model of somewhat of what their community is, or they build that out. And so I think things like gamification, especially for I got a brother who's not in here right now, but he's 16, and they're intrinsically ingrained with technology. Almost cyborg. Like you have your phone on you all the time. You don't need to put stuff inside you. You carry it with you. And so, I think Marvin is a great example. He's like, I can't be a computer scientist. Well, the younger generations can. And so that's the partnership there, because they just naturally know how to use technology.
But see, that's the problem. They haven't even touched the soil.
Yeah.
They have no relationship with the planet. Why would I want more technology? What did Einstein say? We're becoming more and more detached.
Yep.
That's the problem, guys. We have society, 350 million people, and only 1% of them interface with the planet. They don't even know how to grow their own food. Those are basic things, skills we've lost. I go work with tribes. The Indian tribes have lost the things they had been taught from generation to generation to generation. How do we connect people to that?
Well, but even with the younger generations, we've talked about this several times. We have to meet them where they are. You know what I mean? So they're ingrained. They're on their phones. Okay, you can come use your phone on the farm if you want, but we're going to put it down for 4 hours, 5 hours, and you're going to come out here and work, and then we're going to try to find an integration for you to use that tech, to handle. And so I think it's got to start with the schools. I mean, me personally, I went to high school. I was a 3-letter varsity person, and I missed as much school as I could every single year. My senior year, the principal calls me in the office and says, Jason, if you miss one more day of school, you're not going to graduate. Because I was in football, basketball, baseball, so I was only in school half the year anyway. And so it's like, because there wasn't anything stimulating, for me. It wasn't getting me excited about things. Like, there was a couple classes that I really liked, but most of them I was just like, and at that time I was drinking Mountain Dews every morning, and I was like, I look back, I'm like, why every day? Like, come on, Jason, like you didn't need that. But then I, see the kids now it's energy drinks. So it's another level, I guess, up. And so what is the role of academia? Like Marvin, you were talking about it. I got a graduate certificate in social entrepreneurship, and I should have been teaching the class, in the sense, because it's like, I learned a lot of these things, and it's still basic. Give me something I can go do right now from this class or in college, and let's use it to learn.
I want to push back not push back. I want to provide an adjunct to something that Ray was just talking about. And the question is, how do we walk and chew gum at the same time? So, Ray's in terms of let's get everything covered, let's talk to people, let's keep the message simple. Let's call that walking for a second. How do we address the sort of the systemic corruption that Ray was talking about? Because, and it's not necessarily, corruption may be an overly strong word, but this incentive systems that people operate in determine what they do. And the incentive systems are entirely screwed up, and that applies to our politics as well. And so here's a key question. I introduced that book, The Industry of Politics. Great book. They are getting behind a very simple message, that our political system is broken, is becoming more polarized. There are specific reasons for that. The system is designed to cause polarization and cause breakage. Why can't we get the people that you're talking to also thinking about, okay, what is it that we could very simply do to fix that larger system? And for example, what that book is promoting is a very simple two-step message, that we need to go to top 5 primaries. So it's not just one Democrat and one Republican. It's the top 5 vote getters that advance to the general election, and that in the general election, we need to have ranked choice voting so that you don't win with 33%. The lowest scoring person, their votes get assigned to the other people until someone is over 50%, so that the person who actually wins the election can claim to have some sort of majority behind them. Very simple, 2 messages. Alaska is the first state in the country to implement those 2 things, and they just did that in November of 2020. And there are going to be it's going to be on 10 ballots or so next year. That fixes the system that makes it possible to do lots of these other things that we're talking about. how do we get your constituencies to support those ideas to fix the larger system, even while they're primarily focused on their land?
Mark's very kind. The ancestral corruption is a wicked problem. When you put yourself and your company above the needs of the land and the people, it is corrupt. Let's just call it what it is. The problem is we don't speak out enough about it. We just let it happen. We as a collective need to speak out against it. But good luck. That's another thing. But that's why I'm saying, that's why I took it to the people. This is why we had to take it down. Case in point, if a huge movement occurs, what percentage does it take to create a movement? We've been taught this. It's anywhere from 1 to 13%, called the early, what do they call it, the early innovators? Yeah. Okay? We're not there yet. Then I call the other part, after early innovators, early adopters, and then the other is, I call them sheeple. They'll follow along. And there's 10 or 20% will never get it, get away from me. That's our reality. So where are we at that I see as a collective? And I'm just talking from my own perspective on the agriculture realm. We're not there yet. We're maybe a couple of percentage. That is where we're at. But if we can get to that 10 to 12%, you could be surprised as a catalyst how far that quick can change over. So it's really where are you at the initial point. So where are we at? So that's very critical to understand where we're at as a collective, and even the climate. I don't know how many people are really, really aware or really understand it. Where do you think we are, Mark? Less than 1%? Or no, it's more. More? Oh, yeah. But from a other type of change, I see it less.
So we've talked about a lot of different things, the way we vote, the way we do this, the way we do that. There wasn't but one perfect guy, and they crucified him. So we're probably not going to be able to be perfect. But, and we've sat up here and we've talked about change. What do we do? So that guy sitting right there in the cowboy hat, and that guy walking across the back there, and some of them guys sitting on that row right there, I don't know how many of them are involved in Desert Mountain. But yesterday, my little mom and pop wrote a check to a rancher for $7,060 to improve 30 acres. That's $242 an acre. We saw a problem. I'm like you, I'm not a big fan of carbon credit. I don't think it's doable. You and I may have to have a conversation about how we calculate it. We're using the Haney test. Don't know if that's the right way or not, but it's GPS. It's consistent. But we went out and started a nonprofit, and we raised that money to pay that rancher. No government intervention, no corruption, unless he doesn't do it, then I'll send somebody after him. But no government corruption, just a free enterprise system to accomplish what nearly everybody up here is talking about. But what came out of it was these guys back here, they called me at 6:45 to have a 7 o'clock meeting. And we went and ate last night at a place that serves Desert Mountain, and they're already thinking, how can we take what you're doing with your total ecological solution, carbon, we call it climate wellness. I don't do climate change. I mean, it is, but how do we make climate wellness? And they're already in their minds, they're trying to figure out how can they use their beef to educate their consumers and educate their buyers to understand what we're all talking about here. And so it's a call to action. Yeah, so the government's corrupt. It's been corrupt for a pretty long time. You know, it didn't just get corrupt yesterday. So let's just set that to the side. We know it's corrupt. The school districts are corrupt. The police department's corrupt. You know, there's a lot of this in the world. To your point, climate change is real. No question about it. But is the solution-based approach real? Is it realistic? Can we, you know, I got a cotton farmer in Midkiff. Anybody know where Midkiff, Texas is? It's 115 there yesterday, and it's acres and acres of acres and acres. I have a cotton farmer that used to go to the cotton gin, take all the cotton trash. He went and bought a great big green trailer, and he used to drive it down and put it over his field. Why? Because his soil temperature was 10 degrees cooler, and when he did get some rain, it stayed in the ground. But the call to action is action. The call to action is not, let's talk about it. Them guys called me today. They want to figure something out. That's a call to action. And they put it on me. They put the responsibility on me to write up a paper, to tell them what I thought, and then them come back and say, well, we don't see it that way, but we're going to get there. But the reality of this thing is, we only have 26 seconds. The reality of this thing is, Jacob took a call to action knowing full well that we may not have 5,000 people sitting out here in the audience. But that wasn't the end result for you. The end result was that you took the call to action. If you go to Ryan, Oklahoma, you'll go to the Senior Citizen Center and you'll see a picture of a little old lady named Lill P. Nash. That was my grandmother. My grandmother put together one of the first senior citizens centers in the entire United States. She was a single mom. Her husband had died. She had 3 boys, which one of them was my dad. And she used to get all the old ladies around, and they would build pillows at the Senior Citizen Center and sell them at the White's General Store, which is now like Walmart or anything else. But it was a call to action. Somebody's got to, you have to write a check. You have to make it happen. And it's not easy. I mean, I guarantee you, I'd bet what I got in my hip pocket, this wasn't no moneymaker, this summit. But that wasn't the call to action. And if you take faith and put that with your hope, we're going to get there. This is not doom and gloom, sports fans. We're going to get climate wellness. And it's things like this today. It's things like those people sitting out there and those people listening wherever you are that are going to take calls to action. If you come away from one of your talks and you see one guy walk up to you at the end of it and say, hey, Ray, I want to try to do this, you've been successful. Or a woman. Or a child. Or a child. Yep. Or if she gets somebody else engaged in her range management practices and those kind of things, then that's a win. I bought a plane ticket. Let me finish with this and I'll shut up. I bought a plane ticket. And at the bottom of my plane ticket, it said, your carbon footprint is 0.00239 tons per something or another. And I read that on Sunday after listening to the T.D. Jakes preach all morning. And I got to thinking about it, and I said, what if I had a climate wellness impact indicator? What if, when I took my shower the first day and I used my towel, what if I didn't use another towel the second day? I just used the same towel I used the first day. Hung it out, it dried out, it's perfectly fine. What if all 500 people in the motel only used one towel and they only had to wash X towels? How do I give them any credit for that? How do I say, hey, that was a climate impact indicator that saved X number of washings? Amazon, Netflix, everybody. But we all, I love y'all's concept that we're all talking about kind of the negative. Let's talk about the positive, which we want to do. But can we get to the solutions? Let's talk about the reality. But, Ray, congratulations. 3 people showed up and made a change because you drove 500 miles and had that conversation. That's a climate impact indicator of success. You talk about climate change, and somebody says, oh, wait a minute, what can I do? There's only 3 ways for the average person to affect climate change. They can eat vegan, they can sort their trash, or they can go to a protest. But they don't know that. So there could be 100,000. If they don't know that, we don't know what we don't know. So they don't know that. And it's things like this that will help them learn that. It's things like what Bob and Rich and all these other, it's things like that that they want to do. How many, well, there was 100 people in that restaurant last night, I think. If we had educated them on environmental stewardship while they were eating their hamburger, a grass-fed burger, then we've accomplished the next step. If I hadn't come, if Bob and them hadn't come, if we hadn't gone out to eat, if you hadn't done this, we wouldn't be having that conversation. So that's the success of the call to action.
You know, I totally agree with that, and we've been doing events since 2014, and we haven't made a whole lot of money on the events, but we've built a whole lot of relationships around the events. And so like this one in particular, you know, it's like I'm break even, you know, here, but that's a success for me because we have all you speakers here. Now we have this network that we can communicate, and they'll say, hey, Jason, you know, we're wanting to connect with this person, or I'm saying, hey, Ray, I need to connect with that person. And now we have this relationship built with all of our partners, and so it makes it worth doing. There's a lot of sweat equity, you know, that goes into these things, and they're very risky, I guess you could say. I've taken events, you know, to where I've gotten smacked around, you know, so hard doing, you know, trying to go as big as we can, and then the corporations and things like that, who you think would be involved, like, oh, you know, come to us next year, you know. So next year never comes. It never does. You know, I've heard that from, you know, probably 10 big companies that are, you know, in oil and gas. So like, oh, you know, this sounds good, you know, but we're probably not going to do anything this year. You know, come back next year. And so that has always been the most frustrating saying to me, because it's like, there is no next year for you guys. It's like, just give me a no.
Until
you know?
there is.
Yeah, well,
Until there is. Challenge accepted.
You keep going.
Yes.
But I think we're in a unique situation now, coming out of a pandemic, where they're like, hey, well, we probably need to get involved in the communities here. You know, and so...
Yeah, some of them, what I love, one of the things I love about the pandemic, or the result of it, is a lot of big businesses, corporations, even, you know, churches, I mean, all kinds of large organizations, either really get how connected everything and everyone is, because it was the best example ever, or they're feeling the pressure to pretend like they get it and lean in anyway.
Yeah.
And I say, if you're leaning in, hoorah. You know, like time, talent, treasure, influence, to your point, you know, we need to have the conversations, because first it starts with an idea, then we talk about it, then we do the things, because you don't want people running around doing the things if there's no strategy to it. But I think these conversations are important, and then it is, who do you know, and how can we galvanize, and where do we go, and then how do we scale it quickly enough that we make the kind of systemic change we need to. You know, we can't just talk about it and feel good about the conversation. It's got to move, and we've got to get a lot more people on board.
I think, you know, to Mark's point, I'm fine with greenwishing if you write a check. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a corporation and you're talking about greenwishing, about what you're going to do, but if you support the social entrepreneurs, the people who are taking action, I'm fine with your greenwishing, because we'll move you to the evidence base. You know, but if you don't write a check, then you're greenwashing. You know, and that's the difference. There's a lot of people in the middle who want to do the right thing, you know, or know they need to do the right thing. But it's the difference between, if you're writing that check and you're supporting those people who are taking action, we can move you to that evidence base. We'll find those resources for you. But if you ain't writing a check, you are greenwashing. And that is the difference, because the check is the accountability piece.
You know, there's
there.
another way to write a check, though, too. It is that social influence.
Yeah.
You know, somebody gets online, or they share with their entire, you know, customer base, or even in their entire employee base, if the
Yep.
base is big enough.
Yep.
You know, sometimes it starts with a check. Sometimes it starts with that open door. Let's share some of these ideas. Let's get the conversation going. I was talking with George Mulhern of Cradle Point, who's here in town, and you know, they just sold for what, $1.1 billion last year to Erickson Mobile. So I guess their year was okay in spite of the pandemic, right? But just talking with him, it's like, you know, here's a guy that's very influential. And so even if George didn't write a check to an initiative, if George went on LinkedIn and talked about it, or shared it with his, you know, with some of his base, that is a form of a check as well.
George got an email. He responded, on LinkedIn. He responded, but didn't get back to me at all. So.
Oh, no. Now you just threw George under the bus. I'm
Well,
sorry,
George needs to know.
No,
I'm just-
but here's a guy that does. He really cares, and it's important. But I'm just using that as an example of some
But
people.
it's the trust thing. It's
Right.
really it's
True.
a relationship based. Most communities are relationship based.
Right.
So if they necessarily don't know me, I understand that.
Right.
Especially a first year. So I can understand people not getting back.
Right.
But I'm the guy that's going to be back next year.
Right.
And say, hey, you didn't really respond to me last year. I
Right.
got you here right now.
And
So
you
what do you
understand, right,
feel?
when people are cross-pollinating their brands,
Yeah.
they have a brand to protect, or they have, a board of directors
Risk
or
aversion.
whatever.
That's the big corporate talk. I guess
What's
you can say.
cool is you did earn your stripes. Like, you're doing that even now. So good news. Good news. I love the early responders, but then more and more people, but you got to stay at it, right? We can't quit. Like, we've got to, persistency, consistency. Say it again.
Persistent pressure, persistently applied.
And I would also say compassionately, right? Because if people shut down, we talked about that. If you shut down, there's no dialogue, there's no solution. But if we stay in the conversation, keep learning, and then all of us have something, big or small, that we need to be doing.
Yep.
Doing, not just talking about it. I love it. I know we got to wrap.
All right,
Way
we got to
go.
wrap it up. We're going to go grab some Desert Mountain grass-fed steak. And
Do we have
will
lunch
be,
sponsors? Lunch sponsors?
Yeah, well, Desert Mountain Holiday Inn, they're the ones
There you
that
go.
providing all this delicious, nutrient-dense food that we're going to be consuming to keep our brains powered for the afternoon.
And then this afternoon, we have a lot more speakers. We have another panel, just so much more. So stay in the conversation with us, and we will get back in about 30 minutes.